Hello and welcome to episode 20 of Question and Answer. I am your host, Panyo Basa, and there are a number of assistant hosts wandering around, including this one who is not wandering around but is pretty much crashed. And it's kind of amazing that we're up to number 20 already. 20 question and answer videos. First six at least were probably when I was still a monk in California. But let's just go ahead with this and start answering questions. And there are like some difficult questions this time, like subtle, kind of difficult kind of questions. And I'll do my best. But it is winter time and the days are short and dark, and I've been kind of hibernating all day. So I'll do my best. The first question is from Jay Good. And Jay Good says, Hey Panyo Basa, what is your view of the eternal chitta doctrine taught by Ajahn Mun and Mahabua? Well, some Thai Ajahns do talk a lot about jit or chitta, and especially like in this context, there's like this eternal cosmic mind or something, which is emphasized a lot more in Mahayana. In Theravada, it's not really orthodox, but some monks, especially like in Thailand, where the Burmese invaded Thailand back in the 1700s, I think, and pretty much sacked their capital city of Ayutthaya. And the Thais never fully recovered from having like not only the national capital, but like the religious capital of the nation pretty much sacked. And so like the ecclesiastical schools and all that were pretty much wrecked. And Thailand never really got back on par with regard to scholarship, not that I'm aware of. So a lot of Thai Ajahns, even though they're meditation masters, they explain things in unorthodox ways. And this is one of them, I guess. I mean, there is some mention of like an eternal chitta in the Pali text. It's like vestigial. It's like pre-Theravadan, pre-Orthodox, in which it's referring to apparently Nibbana or Nirvana as infinite formless consciousness. And that's the same sort of thing I assume that Ajahn Mun and Ajahn Mahabua were teaching, although I really don't read up much on what modern Ajahns or Sayadaws or Mahatheras teach. So, I mean, it does have some basis in the Pali texts, where you can say that Nirvana as a metaphysical state is essentially the same as Brahman as a metaphysical state as taught in the Upanishads. Although one big difference is that in Buddhism, this absolute, the ultimate reality is not called the self. That nowhere is nirvana, nibbana, this cosmic mind, called a self or soul in Theravada Buddhism. Not in any clear, unambiguous, uncontroversial way. So what they're doing is they're tapping into this ultimate reality, and then for the sake of convenience, or maybe through lack of philosophical sophistication or some such, they are reifying it and calling it like this existent state. But in Buddhism, especially the deeper philosophies of Buddhism, the absolute just is not reified. It's totally off the scale. You don't say that it exists or that it doesn't exist. It's just off the scale, and you can't really say anything about it. So it's just a matter of personal choice, I suppose, that they choose to talk about it as like this existent state. It doesn't get a whole lot of mention like that in the Pali text, although every once in a while you do have to describe nirvana as an it, as something that presumably exists. But yeah, I mean, it's like an Upanishadic approach to Buddhism. I guess you could call it that. So I think I'll just move on to the next question. And the next question is from Potila. And Potila says, what are your thoughts about a monarchy? Pros and cons. Could it work again after the brief republic democracy experiment? Well, I think like an enlightened monarchy would be way better than a democracy. That to have like an enlightened philosopher king would be possibly the best form of government if there's going to be a government. But the problem is that when the quality of the government depends on one person, and you wind up with just some bloodthirsty, ruthless sociopath taking over, then yeah, a monarchy is worse than a democracy. So democracy is good because it's kind of stable. You wind up with a kind of standardized mediocrity. Whereas a monarchy is it can be all over the map. And even, I mean, history has shown that even a really wise and good and benevolent monarch can have a son who's totally corrupt and just a tyrant. So that would be the main con of a monarchy is that it's just so variable. I mean, it can be really good or really bad. Whereas democracy, it's more stable and more, um, it gives more protection against some psychopath ruler. But the next part of the question here is, could it work again after the brief republic democracy experiment? Well, I mean, it worked in Rome. I mean, Rome had a republic for hundreds of years, and then eventually Caesar came along, and you wound up having essentially a dictatorship, which actually strengthened Rome quite a lot at first. And it can happen again, and it might happen again. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But it has, I mean, it has worked in the past, at least with the Rome, which in some ways is sort of like a previous birth of America. That I mean, it doesn't rebirth doesn't really work that way. Entire cultures um, don't undergo rebirth, but I think a lot of people who live in the West or in America may have been Romans in past lives. So next question is also from Potila, and it says, or Potila says, would you be willing to engage in debates with other YouTubers about different political or religious ideas? And yeah, I'm willing, although there is a certain danger in just getting into debates and like making enemies and choosing sides. In the polytext, it does warn against debating, especially in public. But even so, I mean, I think I would be willing, and I have been hoping for someone to come along to debate the whole issue of no self in Buddhism, because I'm continually confronted by reasonably intelligent Buddhists or so-called authorities on Buddhism who just keep insisting that the Buddha taught some kind of soul, maybe even like an immortal individual soul, like Christianity teaches. Um, yeah, and so I've really been looking forward to debating that particular issue with somebody, but nobody has really stepped forward willing to take the bait, so to speak. Um, but yeah, I really do like a certain amount of controversy, a certain amount of back and forth. It doesn't necessarily have to be a formal debate. It could just be like a friendly discussion with some agreement and some disagreement. But yeah, especially if there's any Buddhists out there or authorities on Buddhism who really believe that the Buddha taught that people have like an individual immortal soul, then yeah, you're welcome to do a video with me and we can debate the thing. Or if there's anybody who really disagrees with some of the stuff that I say, yeah, you do have the opportunity to at least invite me to debate you, and we can be on the show and you know put it out there and let the audience decide which side they prefer, if either. Probably your best not really committing yourself to any particular side anyway, at least from a Buddhist point of view. So let's see. So I guess the answer to that question is yeah, I would be willing under certain circumstances. I mean, if the person is obviously not in good faith, then I wouldn't really be willing to debate. It would have to be like a friendly, polite kind of a debate. and in good faith. So the next question, also from Potila. Do you plan to have a study group on a text you like? Um, I've briefly considered it. Uh, I know. I think somebody would probably have to twist my arm or really kind of persuade me to do it. It doesn't really call to me very much. Just partly because I'd be like pushing my own preferences onto other people. You can read the text and decide what you like or don't like, or what you want to study more deeply, something like that. I do put ideas out there, and people can study that, or if there wants, like, we have a Discord server, and there's a lot of back and forth on various topics there. So I mean, that wouldn't really amount to a study group, but yeah, study groups are I don't know. I don't know if it's really my speed or not. So that's just sort of a maybe, a definite maybe. And yet another question from Potila. Excuse me. Any plans to have a live chat hangout with people from the Discord? Yeah, this question has come up a number of times, and I keep saying, yeah, we're gonna do it. And then we've kind of sort of worked out. I'll put like a little announcement on the Discord server, and about as far as we've gotten is we've sort of agreed that Sundays, like maybe Sunday afternoons, my time would be about the best. But there's people all over the world, like Australia and Europe, in addition to North America. And getting one time that's going to work for everybody it's just a non-starter. So yeah, I think there is a good chance that we can work out like Sunday afternoons, American Eastern time, give or take a few hours. Maybe other days, although Sunday tends to work best for me. So yeah, I mean, I am willing. It's just that the momentum really hasn't started going yet. It's like inertia. An object in motion tends to remain in motion, and an object at rest tends to remain at rest. And the live chat hangouts has been at rest, and so it's taking some pushing to get it going. And but I am willing, and apparently there are others who are willing. So yeah, that's something that we should probably really get started on. And last question from Potila. And Potila says, kind of a convoluted question, but can you explain why the good, or kusala, is good in Buddhism? As good has no transcendental basis, like in Christian faith, God is good and the source of good. In Buddhism, because Nibbana is devoid of attributes and conditions, what makes something good? Is it simply because it is conducive to liberation? If so, that means any action that brings one closer to liberation is in fact good. But it is clear in Buddhist texts there is some sort of basis to declare something good, because the Buddha warns people that they will fall into hell realms for their behaviors. Or in your view, does this even matter in Buddhist philosophy? Well, in Buddhist philosophy, usually instead of good and evil or good and bad, it's kusala and akusala, which means skillful and unskillful, or adept and not adept. And it can have two meanings. The higher meaning is that which gets you closer to enlightenment, as Potila says, or another possibility is that it's just getting you closer to heaven realms. That really, a monk, in some texts, especially some older texts, says that a monk needs to leave behind good and bad. He has to leave behind kusala and akusala, because kusala is a kind of kama and akusala is a kind of kama, and an enlightened being just doesn't generate kama of any sort. So it is kind of a complicated issue, but I would say that from the Buddhist point of view, good really is whatever gets you closer to liberation. And the Buddha can talk about how some actions can cause you to go to hell and so forth, but that's because some actions almost necessarily have accompanying mental states that are leading you closer to enlightenment or farther away from it. Like, one of the classic examples of an action that will just guarantee hell is killing one of your own parents on purpose, not accidentally. And the mere act itself really isn't what sends you to hell. It's the mental states, and you just can't deliberately murder one of your own parents with like wholesome mental states that reduce desires and reduce clinging, and reduce the muddiness of the mind, reduce the greed, hate, and delusion. It just increases it and makes things worse. So yeah, good. What is good from Buddhist philosophy anyway is that which causes fewness of desires and fewness of attachments and fewness of preferences in your mind is light, and it leads to happiness, really. I mean, that's sort of what Buddhist ethics are based on, is happiness and unhappiness, or dukkha and the cessation of dukkha. So whatever is conducive to the cessation of dukkha is going to be good from a Buddhist point of view. And although the same outward act can be kusala for some people and akusala for others because of the underlying mental states differing. The underlying mental states, I mean, if you've got, if you're motivated by hate or greed or that sort of thing, then yeah, it's going to be have negative consequences, and it would not be good to that extent. So I'll just move on to the next question, which is from Alfred. And Alfred says, I would like to inquire more about your nimitta experiences. So I suppose first I should explain nimitta. Nimitta literally means something like sign or marker. It's kind of like a symbol that represents something. Like a boundary marker in Pali is also called nimitta. But here, it's something that you see in your meditation. And a nimitta is associated with what is called upachara samadhi, or access concentration. It's like pre-jhana. The stage right before jhana is this upachara samadhi, and that is when you experience a nimitta. And in a way, it's kind of apocryphal. It's mainly from the commentarial tradition, because it's not really mentioned in the suttas. And if it's really that important to experience upachara samadhi and see nimittas when you're meditating, then you'd think that the Buddha himself would emphasize it, but apparently he did not. And in this case, nimitta is something that you see while you are meditating. So usually it will be just like a circle of light, like a white luminous disc or oval, or some people will even see images like the Buddha sitting in meditation, something like that. And it's very vivid, and that indicates that your samadhi is getting stronger, and that the next stage after that will be jhana, which is well, I don't want to get into jhana. It's kind of a controversial issue also, but it is like the four main stages of deep meditation that are mentioned many times in the Buddhist texts. So Alfred here would like to inquire more about my own personal nimitta experiences. And first of all, I'd just like to say that I've never tried to see a nimitta, because, like I say, it's not really mentioned in the suttas. It's largely an artifact of the commentarial tradition. But I have seen a nimitta at least once. I was just meditating. My meditation was going relatively well, and just with my eyes closed, there appeared it was like a duck egg. It was kind of this shape, and it was white or maybe very light gray. And it just kind of stayed there and didn't do anything. And it's not really a very exciting story, but Alfred asked about it, so yeah, that was my main nimitta experience that I'm aware of. Is just seeing this luminous cloud-like duck egg with my eyes closed when I was meditating one time. But it's a lot of people experience it, and it is a real thing. But I am skeptical as to its necessity if you want to cultivate deeper meditative states. So, next question is also from Alfred. And Alfred says, can you elaborate on your experience of karma in Burma, also mind states, etc.? Well, that's just a wide open question. I could elaborate on all sorts of things. Um, can you elaborate on your experience of karma in Burma? Um, Maybe one of my best examples of karma in Burma is the notion that if you practice Dhamma intensively, Dhamma kind of protects you. And if something bad happens to you, there's going to be mitigating circumstances that make it not so bad. And so, an example of that would be when I was in Burma, especially living out in the remote areas, like rural areas, associated with like villages, farming villages. I'd be biting into rocks a lot in my food. Um, they would thresh their rice and beans on the ground, and so little white rocks could get mixed in with the rice, and little brown rocks could get mixed in with the beans. And every once in a while, I'd bite into a rock, and there'd be like this loud crack, and it would hurt. And I'd be feeling around in my mouth to see if I'd broken a tooth or lost a filling or anything. And out in the middle of nowhere, I mean, if you break a tooth, you're pretty much screwed. I mean, it's not easy to get to a dentist. So that happened several times, and I never really broke a tooth or lost a filling or anything. And then I happened to be in Rangoon, like the by far the largest city in Burma, Yangon it's called now. And I was going for alms round just in this rich neighborhood, and this servant girl gave me some bean curry that had a little brown rock in it, and I broke three teeth biting into this one rock. It just kind of got in the, like in between the teeth, kind of, there's like four teeth come together, broke three of them. But as it turned out, that servant girl, who was right across the street from where I was staying, was a servant girl of the dean and rector of the Burmese dental college. He was like the number one dentist in Burma. And he was also the same dentist that the military dictator was using. So he fixed my teeth for free just like the very next day, and he became my dentist and worked on my teeth for free for years after that. So it turned out not to be entirely bad. Or another example of karma, like even if something bad happens to you, that some mitigating circumstance makes it not so bad, is I was hospitalized with malaria twice when I was in Burma, both times just out in the middle of nowhere. It was like 2.5 hours by jeep to get to this place, and both times that I got malaria so bad, it was the first two times that I got malaria, always the worst kind too. Somebody showed up in a jeep that same day that I decided, yeah, I need to see a doctor, and they just drove me right back into town. In fact, the first time was, I think it was Christmas Day. Somebody showed up in a jeep, and it's like, Merry Christmas, I have malaria, and they just kind of loaded me into the jeep and just took me right back into town. So, getting back to Alfred's question here, can you elaborate on your experience of karma in Burma? That would probably be my best, most obvious example. I mean, karma is always happening. Everything that we're experiencing is conditioned by past karma and present karma, and trying to elaborate on that, trying to give concrete examples of that when it's so subtle and it just permeates everything is not easy. So, that's about my best story about if you're practicing Dhamma intensively, then Dhamma kind of protects you. Like maybe another example would be when a monk goes for alms, he's just supposed to accept whatever people put into his food, and a lot of these people way out in the hills, these hillbilly types, they got no concept of hygiene, or of microbial transfer or anything. I've seen this one little kid. He was offering food. He looked like the feral child in the old movie, The Road Warrior, just this wild-looking little kid, and he's just coughing into the food. He had some kind of nasty cold, just coughing directly into the food that he was going to put into my bowl. And as a monk, I mean, you're just not allowed to even raise an eyebrow. You just poker face. You just, regardless of any kind of aversion of what's going on, you just watch it go into the bowl. Maybe remember where it is so you can eat from the other side or something. One time there was this lady in the village. I mean, she just blew her nose with her hand, just kind of flung the snot off of her hand, and then just used the same hand to put food into my bowl. So you just have to accept it. I mean, you really don't have any alternative. You just calmly accept it, and you just have faith that if I'm taking care of Dhamma, then Dhamma will take care of me. And although I did catch colds a lot, I really was relatively fortunate with regard to not getting anything really gnarly other than the malaria, which wasn't caused by the food. It was caused by mosquitoes. So yeah, that would be about my best example. So I'm just going to move on to the next question. And the next question is from Air Rain. And Air Rain says, wondering for the next Q&A, do Buddhist ethics differentiate between lying to a human versus a corporation, the state, a court of law, etc.? For example, a person who declares sovereign citizenship and lies about paying taxes, or someone who lies under oath against a court they view as unjust. Well, the main ethical aspect of lying is you have to have the intent to deceive somebody. So, like, maybe an extreme version of this would be like you're going to download some sort of software onto your computer, and of course you get the 17 pages of incomprehensible lawyer speak that you're supposed to read, and then at the bottom you say, yes, I have read and agree to this. And it used to kind of bother me because I don't want to read the 17 pages of lawyer speak. I mean, it doesn't make much sense anyway. It's boring as hell. But then I realized that in order to really be lying, you have to have the intention to deceive somebody, and no human is ever going to read your thing that you clicked on saying I agree. It's all computers, it's all AI or whatever. So something like that I would not consider to be necessarily a case of lying, but it depends on your intentions. The intention has to be to deceive somebody in order for you to be lying. So if you lie, if you just say something that is false accidentally, then that's not lying, regardless of what propagandists will say. Or you're just telling a joke. Somebody misinterprets what you're saying, something like that. Then yeah, you're really not lying. But with regard to lying to a corporation or the state, a court of law, etc., to the extent that you are attempting to deceive other people, it's just, lying is lying. So, yeah, that wouldn't really matter. And there may be cases in which lying is justified. So there is that. But still, it's lying. I mean, you're going to take the hit for lying. There is a certain amount of akusala, karma, that's going to occur, but it may be that you get more positive in certain rare cases. Like one of my best examples of that is there's a famous short story. I think it's like maybe even a Christmas story. The Other Wise Man. I can't remember who wrote the story. I've got the book, but I'm not going to get up and look it up. But it's about a friend of the three wise men that go to offer gifts to the Christ child, in the manger. But he's supposed to meet up with them at this oasis, but he keeps meeting up with people needing his help, and he's helping them, so he's lagging behind. So eventually he gets to Jerusalem. I think, no, Bethlehem or Jerusalem, I can't remember. And I mean, the wise men are, the other three wise men have already moved on. Maybe they've gone to Bethlehem, he's still in Jerusalem or something. And there's this decree by King Herod that all baby boys are to be put to death. And so this wise man, he's got these jewels that he's going to offer to the Messiah when he gets there. And the soldiers are going from door to door, pounding on the doors, and they're gonna kill every baby boy. And this wise man stands in the doorway, and he's got this huge pearl. And he just offers it to the centurion or whoever it was, the soldier, and says, "There aren't any babies here." And then the soldier looks at this pearl and just he decides to accept it, and he just calls out to the other ones, just move on. There's no babies here. And so I mean, technically, the wise man did tell a lie, but he told a lie in order to save the life of a baby. And the mother, of course, is just on her knees crying with happiness and thanking him over and over again. So, I mean, there could be circumstances in which lying may have more good than bad involved, but still it's lying. And if you're not going to commit yourself to even conventional truth, then ultimate truth is going to be more elusive and harder to realize. So I think that's enough for that question. And I'll move on to the next one, which is from Tyre or Tyr. I really do not know how to pronounce this name. It's just spelled Tyr. And Tyre or Tyr asks, do you think it would be possible for you to describe what it was like living in the cave? How you spent your days, how long you were there, etc. Well, actually, I lived in several caves, and each one was different, and the circumstances were different. Um, let's see. So that's, yeah. I mean, I just go through phases. Like there was this one cave I lived in. At It's at the northern edge of Alando Katapa National Park, and it was really just this huge overhanging rock ledge. So it was like the entrance of this cave. It was called Wunsha Oatmin, which means belly full cavern, something like that. It was like 100 feet across, and it went in maybe 30 feet. So I mean, it wasn't really that much of a cave. If it's the wider than it is deep. But I was doing really intensive practice there when the weather permitted, when it wasn't just so blazing hot that I just would just lie there, fanning myself, wiping the sweat off the arm that was holding the fan every now and then. So yeah, I was doing very intensive meditation there. Yeah, definitely the most intensive meditation of my life was in that cave. But then other places I would live in different caves that I wouldn't be pushing myself to the limit. It would just be like everyday life there. Like the one place I've lived longer than any other place in my life, I'm pretty sure, is a cave that I named Tabo Guha in northwestern Burma. And it was a deluxe cave. It was man-made. It was dug into the side of this hill, and it had like 4 rooms and like a 50-foot long walkway where you could do walking meditation inside in the shade. Had a screen door to keep out bats, rats, rodents, let's see, snakes and humans. And it's how I spent my days. When I was living there, you'd get up at around dawn, a little before dawn, because I'd have to walk to the village to get my meal and be back again before the sun got very high, because I just cannot take the blazing tropical heat of central Burma. So I'd go for alms round very early, come back, eat, um, and most of the rest of the day it'd just be, I'd read some, I'd meditate a lot, do a lot of walking meditation, just the standard stuff that you do: brush your teeth, take a bath, go to the bathroom. It was just a very simplified, stripped down lifestyle with more meditation than most, and probably more asceticism than most. Like when I was living in that cave, I spent a lot of time just sleeping on a concrete floor with a piece of wood for a pillow, and it wasn't for the sake of the ascetic practice of it. That was literally the most comfortable way of sleeping in that cave, because it was so hot during the hot season that just being on a cool concrete floor was about the only way not to just try to sleep in a puddle of your own sweat. And the wooden pillow, it wouldn't soak up sweat the way a cloth one would. So yeah, I have made videos, at least one, just talking about the various caves I lived in and the circumstances. So maybe it would be best if the person curious about my cave dwelling experience looked that up. Um, Otherwise, maybe I can just do a video talking about caves I have lived in. So let's see, I'll go over the question again, make sure that I've kind of answered it at least. Do you think it would be possible for you to describe what it was like living in the cave? Yeah. And it was various caves. I lived in natural ones and in artificial ones and big ones and little ones, and it was quite a few of them. Um, I calculated that probably 13, at least 13 years of my life were spent living inside of caves. And it was mainly just a matter of survival because central Burma really is just like furnace like heat much of the time. And it was just a matter of surviving, just becoming like a desert rat where you'd be in the burrow during the daytime and come out at night, kind of a thing. Those were the days. So I think I'll just move on to the next question after taking a drink of water. From the Christmassy mug. Next question is from Yuichiro. And Yuichiro says, many schools in the US are teaching secular mindfulness. Do you think this is a good thing? I think it's probably better than nothing. Yeah, I would agree that it is better than nothing. Um, just basic mindfulness where you're detaching from your own mental states, where fear arises and you just observe it as fear arising. You don't identify with it. I'm afraid, I'm scared. No, it's just fear is arising. And just that is such a powerful mental technique to know. It's already separated you from the fear so that you are not the fear anymore. And then eventually, if you get good enough at it, you can just let it go. So, I mean, just planting the seeds of that sort of thing is good. And the more you practice meditation, if you're practicing it correctly, then you are going to get benefits. You are going to become a little wiser. And maybe when you become a little wiser, you may develop better reasons for meditating and better goals and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Um, yeah, I think it's definitely more good than bad. So, next question, also from Yuichiro. I'm really struggling with veganism or veganism. I know that it's cringe from my gut feeling, but if it is actually just but if it is actually just wanting to reduce suffering of living beings, isn't that a good thing? Well, it depends on your own mental states, and that's the easy cop out answer, I suppose. But the Buddha wasn't even vegetarian. Just going with the ancient Pali texts, and even the Mahayana Buddhists have these vestigial meat rules in the rules of monastic discipline that they don't notice because they don't follow the rules of monastic discipline. They made up different monastic codes that they follow instead. Um, Even like Hindu yogis that are really into purity of food. They stress the importance of a sattvic diet, which is conducive to wisdom and serenity and so forth. I mean, even that is not vegan. It's a sattvic diet is mostly like grains, fruits, nuts, and dairy products. So they includes dairy products, and it is possible to get your animal protein without necessarily being cruel to animals. Like Mahatma Gandhi, he was insisting on being vegan, I think, because he didn't want anyone to be cruel to dairy cattle or something in order for him to get some food. So finally, because his health just really was deteriorating at the time, just through just strenuous persuasion on the part of everyone around him, they finally talked him into just keeping a goat so that he could drink goat milk, which is animal protein, of course, and then he could see for himself that the goat wasn't being abused or anything. So, yeah, wanting to reduce suffering in living beings is fine, but I mean, there are limitations. I mean, even if you're eating vegan, a lot of those farmers who are farming the vegan veggies are wearing leather shoes and they've got like a leather belt, maybe a leather wallet. Maybe they're using insecticides, which is killing little insects. So, I mean, there's going to be suffering, and you're not really responsible for that. Buddhist ethics really are radically different from just the default ethics of the West. The default ethics of the West are, it's like Jeremy Bentham's utilitarianism or something like that, where it's um, just causing suffering is bad and reducing suffering is good. But that's really not what Buddhism is about. Buddhist ethics, um, because Buddhist ethics is based on your own intentions. And like I said, the Buddha himself ate meat, although he wasn't in favor of killing. It was just that Buddhist monks were beggars who just took their bowls and ate whatever people wanted to give them within reason. So, it is against the rules for a monk to eat meat that he thinks has been killed for his sake. So you're not supposed to be responsible directly for the killing. And then, of course, people in the West will say even just buying meat, that's casting a vote in favor of killing and so forth. But it's really just a matter of your own intentions. And if you think of it that way, it's like, well, if I buy this meat, then I'm voting in favor of killing. Then there you go. You've committed yourself to that approach. But and if you're just buying meat, and obviously the buying of the meat isn't hurting anybody or anything, just that act of buying that meat and going home and cooking it and eating it, you're really not hurting anything. And just from a biological point of view, think, for example, what happened to the horse population after people invented cars and stopped riding horses and buggies and that sort of thing. There was like a population crash of horses, and if people stop eating beef and chickens and so forth, I mean, the species is going to crash. It's not they're not going to go extinct, but still, it's from a biological point of view, it's to their advantage to be domesticated and exploited by humans. I think the one of the worst things about meat is it involves a kind of treachery on the part of the farmer, where like in Dante's Inferno, treachery is the worst sin because that's what Judas, he was a traitor. He's pretending to be the friend of Jesus and then stabs him in the back. And it does seem to me like some farmers do that. They protect the animals and the animals trust them, and then one fine day they just come out and kill them instead. Which yeah, that's kind of karmic complication there. Um, as a layperson before I was a monk, I was mostly vegetarian, although I would eat seafood sometimes because I have a degree in biology and I know that shellfish, invertebrates like clams and shrimp and crabs, they do not have a nervous system like we do. They apparently do not feel pain. Like, for example, I was working as a fisheries biologist on Japanese longline vessels in the Bering Sea long ago. And any crab that would come up, it was my duty to look at it and write down what species and whether it was a boy crab or a girl crab and its viability, see if it was injured, see if it was still healthy when it was returned to the sea because the Japanese sailors weren't allowed to keep high value food like crabs and halibut and salmon and that sort of thing. So sometimes a crab would get hauled in and it would have most of its legs ripped off or crushed, and you'd put it into a holding tank with seawater. And if the crab that just had most of its legs ripped off sees a piece of squid bait there, it just goes over and starts eating it. It's like it doesn't care that it just got most of its legs ripped off. It doesn't seem to be bothered by that. Whereas if you rip three legs off of a mouse and put a cracker in front of it, it would just go into convulsions and die. So the whole nervous system thing is different in invertebrates. Like, for example, I don't think insects feel pain either. A mosquito might fly out of your way if you try to slap it, but it's sort of like the automatic door at the grocery store that opens automatically to get out of your way when you come towards it. It's just a built-in survival mechanism. So, yeah, I would never be vegan. I mean, anything that requires me to stop consuming dairy products, including like pizza and ice cream, is just a non-starter. I'm not doing it. Um, and like I said, the Buddha himself, apparently ate meat. And like Tibetan Buddhists who don't have much choice they eat meat because not a lot of veggies grow well in the Himalaya mountains. So it's just something that, I mean, if you feel comfortable with it, um, yeah, I mean, you have to live with yourself. So, I mean, if you're just absolutely determined that not being vegan is evil, then you better be vegan. But otherwise, I just don't see it. Being vegetarian, eating the sattvic diet that the yogis recommend with dairy products, eating infertile free range eggs, that especially if you've got your own chickens or something, you can see for yourself that the chickens aren't being abused. Um, yeah, I mean it's not evil in my opinion. But if you want to reduce the suffering of living beings, yeah, that's fine. I mean, there's regardless of what you do or don't do, there's going to be an infinite sea of misery in this universe, infinite sea of dukkha. But yeah, sure. I mean, if you want to alleviate it in your immediate proximity, then yeah, that's fine. It's good. I mean, you can get wholesome karma for that. But making yourself anemic and sickly because you're not eating a healthy diet is, it kind of counterproductive. It's like monks have to do this chant, or some monks do, where they're before they eat, they do this little chant, I'm eating this not for the sake of pleasure, not for the sake of beautifying myself, but only for the sake of keeping myself healthy so that I can continue to practice Dhamma. And yeah, you should eat a diet that is conducive to your health, in addition to conducive to your peace of mind with regard to being mean to animals. So I think I'll just move on to the next question here. Let's see. Okay, this one's from Yuichiro also. What's the difference between Freud's Nirvana principle, or if you've seen Evangelion, returning to LCL? Yeah, I don't know what returning to LCL means. Or returning to the womb and actual enlightenment. I have a feeling one is cringe and the other is base, but I can't pinpoint exactly why. A lot of people mistake enlightenment for returning to the womb. Okay. So with regard to Freud, I have no idea what his nirvana principle was, but considering that he was an atheistic materialist, I doubt that there's much profundity to Freud's concept of nirvana. Like his concept of love was like overestimation of the sex object or something. I do not consider Sigmund Freud to have been a particularly wise person. So, yeah, even though I don't really know what Freud's nirvana principle was, I doubt that it was anything particularly profound. Let's see, with regard to Evangelion, returning to the womb, yeah, it's not really. Um, Maybe if you wanted to take returning to the womb in a metaphysical sense of returning to the ultimate source of all things, then maybe that would be a valid way of considering it. But just returning to the womb, I mean, that's what you're trying to avoid with enlightenment. I mean, that's birth and death and rebirth. You're trying to avoid returning to a womb. I've seen some theories. I think it was Carl Sagan was talking about near-death experiences when people have largely uniform experiences with near death, where they rise up and they see their body down below, and then they start going through this tunnel towards the bright light. And he was saying that that's sort of like reliving the birth experience, going through your mama's birth canal or something. But yeah, I think it's Western intellectuals just trying to rationalize something that they don't understand and don't come anywhere close to getting. And that would go double for Freud, because really he was just a materialistic atheist as far as I can tell. So let's see, what's the difference between Freud's nirvana principle, returning to the womb, and actual enlightenment? Yeah, well, actual enlightenment is it's off the scale. I mean, you've essentially merged with ultimate reality. You're not making karma anymore. You're not attached to an identity anymore. Going with St. John of the Cross, who I think may have actually been an Arahant, even though he was a Catholic. He was saying that when you mortify your self-will, you're no longer motivated by your own preferences and so forth. You're motivated by the will of God. You just become like this empty vessel of God. You become like God's puppet. So that could be a way of describing it. And yeah, I'm sure it's a far cry from returning to your mama's nether regions or anything Freud would ever come up with. So I'll just move on to the next question, which is from Numenius, a man of many names. And Numenius says, what are the karmic effects wrought by people embracing either extreme of sexual puritanism or libertine sexual debauchery? Well, I would say for starters, the standard answer that the karmic effects will depend on the individual mental states of the person, because the outward mental states or the outward physical actions are largely irrelevant. So, I mean, you can say that a Buddhist monastic is really embracing this radical extreme of celibacy. It's not really prudery so much, or I guess you could interpret it as prudery. It's not like Victorian sexual puritanism, but it's yeah, it's just like total abstinence. You're not even supposed to think about it. So, I mean, that can have a person, it can help a person to become enlightened, or it can just cause them to become like a chronically horny basket case who are just lusting for every female they see, maybe even lusting for themselves when they're taking a bath. You know, it's like some people, like a starving man, a man who's not eating, but I mean, he might just sit around fantasizing about food all the time. And some people who are celibate for spiritual reasons, even, yeah, they can just sit around fantasizing about sex. I've got some personal experience with that one. In the Bible, Jesus says there are three kinds of eunuchs: born eunuchs, and people who are made eunuchs, and people who are eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. And that third kind, the people who are eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven, are people who are celibate for religious reasons. And then Jesus says right after that, it's not for everybody. So you have to look within yourself and see if you can handle celibacy, or on the other hand, if you can handle just like sexual debauchery. I mean, there are some spiritual teachers like Paul Lowe. He's actually one of my favorite spiritual teachers of those who are still alive today. And yeah, he would he would conduct retreats sometimes where it's like, you know, if you have any doubt as to whether you should have sex with another person at the retreat, just go for it. You know, you should only not do it if you just are sure that you shouldn't do it. So, I mean, it's possible that, you know, either extreme, you know, under some, they're not necessarily bad. I mean, obviously, celibacy isn't bad. I mean, it can be for some people, but the Buddha definitely recommended it, I'm pretty sure. And the other extreme, I mean, it's less likely to be kusala. You know, it's less likely to be conducive to enlightenment. But apparently, you know, you got the tantric people, and maybe some of them are actually handling it and not just getting sucked up in it or something. Yeah, so the extremes, it depends on the individual. It really does. And so I'll just move on to the next question. Well, I'll read this one more time. What are the karmic effects wrought by people embracing either extreme of sexual puritanism? Yeah, before I move on to the next question, I would just say that even though the action or lack of action may seem extreme outwardly, I mean, if inwardly you're still centered and based, you know, if inwardly you're living in a state of equanimity, you know, your mind is not troubled, so forth, then you're doing pretty good, regardless of the outward actions. So now I'll move on to the next question, which is from Scout. And Scout says, does your girlfriend follow Dhamma? And I would say, my girlfriend follows Dhamma, not so different from I do, although she's not really based in Buddhism, but our behavior is pretty similar. I mean, being a girl, she's got the prerogative to change her mind and so forth, and is maybe a little more security oriented than me. But with regard to lifestyle and so forth, we're pretty much sharing the same lifestyle at present, so it's not so different. And doggies keep knocking against the table and shaking the camera. So let's see, next question from the Marquis de Sade, which is kind of an interesting name. Is there a place for honor? Let's see. Is there a place for honor, valor, and glory as metaphysical concepts in Theravada Buddhism? Well, as metaphysical concepts, like going with like Abhidhamma, which says that there are 52 ultimately real mental states. Every mental state you have has to be at least one of these 52. I don't think honor, valor, and glory are any of those three. And so, I mean, from the point of view of orthodox Theravadan tradition, like Abhidhamma philosophy, then the answer would be no. Although there definitely is a place for honor, valor, and glory as ethical concepts in Theravada Buddhism. Not metaphysical, but ethical. And there are a lot of metaphors of like the ascetic being like the true hero, like more heroic than the soldier on the battlefield, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of glory, obviously, in being an enlightened being. And the valor, well, that's essentially courage or fearlessness. So yeah, there has to be that. If you're going to become an enlightened monk living in a forest, you know, you have to be fearless and all that. And with regard to honor, that's kind of a trickier one. Following a code, because out of a sense of duty, that could be honor. But to honor in the sense of like pride, I think that would not be much of a thing in Buddhism. So I'll just move on to the Marquis's next question, which is, what is your opinion on the Hindu concept of the Yuga cycles? Well, actually, it turns out that Buddhism also has the concept of Yuga cycles, where you know, you've got the universe is expanding and contracting, and even the human race will go through cycles where usually it degenerates. I think we're in a state of degeneration now, and eventually it's going to get to the point of people having a lifespan of only like what 12 or 14 years, and they're cannibalizing each other, and there's absolutely no dharma left in the world. And then things hit such rock bottom that it kind of inspires people to start looking for something better, and they start working their way back up again. And the cycles can last a zillion gajillion years. It's just a common Indian concept that the Buddhists and the Hindus share. I don't think the Buddhists have it like nailed down into you know, exact, you know, we're exactly at this age kind of a thing. But it is a similar concept of time going in cycles instead of being linear, like, which is more of a Western approach. So I think I haven't answered the question yet, because the question is, what is my opinion on the Hindu concept of Yuga cycles? I'm pretty skeptical. I'd be surprised if there ever really was a golden age. I think people have pretty much always been kind of messed up. You know, there's always been cruelty and sickness and violence and all this kind of stuff going on. So, yeah, it could just be an artifact of an ancient Indian idea of time moving in cycles. So yeah, my opinion is I don't take it extremely seriously. I mean, obviously, to some extent, time is cyclical, like the seasons and so forth. You know, the years, that could be considered cycles. But like the longer Yuga cycles, yeah, just the very idea that you're going to have on a, like, now, after this earth is destroyed by fire or water or something, that there's going to be another earth arise that's going to have, you know, Indians speaking Sanskrit or Pali, you know, following the same traditions and everything. Yeah, I don't think so. And that kind of segues into the next question. I was also, this is by the Marquis de Sade also. I was also wondering what your general estimation is of Nietzsche as a philosopher. And to tell you the truth, I've never been much interested in Nietzsche. I think the only entire book by Nietzsche that I ever read was his Critique of Christianity, which now I can't even remember, the Antichrist, I think it's called. And even that, I liked Mencken's introduction better than the book that he was introducing. I tried to read Thus Spake Zarathustra, and I got about as far as the tightrope walker falling off the tightrope and maiming himself, and I was kind of in a transitional state. I just kind of lost interest, or just stopped reading for a while and just never really picked it back up again. Um, some people that I respect consider Nietzsche to be really profound, like Jordan Peterson, for example. He thinks Nietzsche was really profound. But from what little I know about Nietzsche, the concept of the Superman and so forth, his concept of the Superman would be very different from a Buddhist Superman. It was trying to rise above good and evil, sort of like Raskolnikov in Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, or Colonel Kurtz in the movie Apocalypse Now. They tried to rise above the petty distinctions of good and evil, and they just wind up going insane. Nietzsche also went insane, although that might have been due to syphilis or something. I don't know. Yeah, and Nietzsche also believed in the cyclic repeating history, which yeah, I just don't see it. Um, so yeah, I think Nietzsche was not a very happy person, and that's really the best judgment or the best indicator of wisdom. Wisdom and happiness go hand to hand, hand to hand. I just said hand in hand. So yeah, if you've got a miserable person trying to teach you how to live your life, you're better off not paying very much attention to them. On the other hand, if you've got a serene, blissful person, they've got a clear, shining face, then even if they're not teaching you anything, you might do well to observe how they're living their life and try to take notes or something. So yeah, my general estimation of Nietzsche as a philosopher is he had some interesting ideas. He came up with some very influential ideas, but I really am not much interested in Nietzsche, and what little I've read of him, his style is just so bombastic and sort of I don't know how to say it. It's just so emotional that yeah, it doesn't really appeal to me. So let's see. Move on to the next question, which is from Chaplin. Is there any Buddhist concept of winter holiday celebrations in the West, or do most Buddhists completely ignore Christmas, etc.? That's kind of a difficult question for me because I'm not sure what most Western Buddhists do. I really haven't been much involved in Western Buddhism. Um, I mean, obviously in Buddhist countries, Christianity is just another day. And for most of my life, more than half of it anyway, as a monk, yeah, Christmas is, you just look at the calendar trying to figure out what day it is. And it's like, oh, yesterday was Christmas. That's interesting. Nobody really celebrates it other than a few converts to Christianity. But in the West, yeah, I mean, it's not really a religious holiday anymore. I mean, for devout Christians it might be, but for non-Christians they celebrate it too. And so I assume lots of Western Buddhists have a Christmas tree in their house, exchange gifts and so forth, just because it's a nice tradition that probably isn't really Jesus's birthday anyway. So let's see. Yeah, I don't know if most Buddhists completely ignore Christmas in the West. Yeah, with regard to Buddhism, there's really no big winter holidays. The end of the Rains Retreat, which is like usually the full moon of October, is maybe the closest you get to a winter holiday. And so finally, last question from Chaplin, and also last question of the night, or the day, or whenever you happen to be seeing this video. How are you enjoying your first Christmas back in America since disrobing? Well, it's fine. It's nice. I really don't have much Christmas spirit. I think once, like around 1988, I was walking out of a department store after spending lots of money for Christmas gifts, and I had like this giddy, almost dizzy feeling. So I think that was Christmas spirit, and I've only experienced it that once, except for maybe when I was a kid. Of course, when you're a kid, you just want to get up and open presents. So that's kind of nice for kids. But for me, it's like every day is pretty much the same. It's like there's no real quality in Christmas Day that makes it any different from 3 days later or 3 days earlier. Um, yeah, it's not even really the winter solstice. So yeah, I mean it's a nice holiday. It's a nice tradition, and I'm quite willing to exchange gifts with people. In fact, this year I made a special point of sending out rubber chickens instead of Christmas cards, which I think is nice. So yeah, it's fine. It's nice. I'm enjoying lots of things, including this Christmas season. And I hope you enjoy your Christmas too and be happy. And I think we're done.